Have you ever found fungus growing in your potted plants? Things like mushrooms or maybe some white fuzzy stuff. Have you tried growing seedlings and had damping off? That's also a fungus. Well, in this video, I'm going to have a look at fungus growing on potted plants. I'll give you some examples and I'll answer the question, is this a real problem and what should you do about it? And then I'll look at several things you can do to get rid of that fungus. Here's a pot of elephant ears that I started this spring, and I found the pot this morning and this whitish fungus was growing all over the top. And I thought, geez, this is a perfect opportunity to make this video. Besides the fact that I see comments online all the time, people post pictures of various growths on their soil and they're very concerned about these and want to know what to do about them. And of course, the internet is full of remedies. Before we have a look at this in more detail, let's have a look at some really cool fungus that you might find. One that I really like is called the dog vomit slime mold. When it's in its prime condition, it's wet looking, it's slimy, it kind of looks like it's oozing out over the top of the soil. It's really quite gross. And in a couple days, it'll turn a brownish yellow, and before you know it, it'll be back underground. Another one that's really cool is dead man's fingers. Believe it or not, this fungus grows just like this picture. That fungus is living off dead wood. I have an old maple stump, and I get this fungus growing every year in the garden. I've never seen it in a potted plant, but I guess there's a possibility it might be there. This is the yellow mushroom. It's a very common mushroom in potted soils. In some of the pictures I've seen, it's a nice yellow color. In other cases, it's more of a white color. But they're essentially small mushrooms that grow in various potted plants. Another one that's very common is a white mold. Now this looks like a very fuzzy material that's laying on top of your soil. And if there's a lot of it, the whole surface can get completely covered with white material. Now to be honest, the dead man's fingers and the dog vomit is mostly found in your garden. But the other examples I gave you can be found in potted plants. So is this a problem? Do you have to be concerned about these various things growing on your soil? Now, the reason people are concerned is because they just look dangerous, right? Who wants this stuff growing in the house? And what kind of health concerns can this cause? Well, as it turns out, most of these fungus cause no harm to you or to the plants. Now, you don't want to go and eat these things. There is one exception, and that's damping off. That's a disease of very small seedlings, and that is also a fungus. That's a fungus you don't really see. One day the seedling is standing there upright, and the next day it's laying down. The third day it's probably dead. So that is one you do want to take care of. So what causes fungus to grow in the soil? Well, what they like is a dark, cool place that has a fair amount of moisture. Well, that sounds like your potting soil. The other thing is that fungus do not photosynthesize. They have no green leaves. They can't make their own food. So they have to get food from somewhere else. And their favorite food is dead material. Dead bits of wood, dead peat moss, a dead leaf from your plant. The mold that I found this morning is actually growing on the old tuber that I used for growing the elephant ears. That's an Edo tuber, and I have a separate video to show you how to grow these. But as the plant starts to grow, the tuber kind of shrivels and gets mushy, and that's a perfect environment for mold to grow, and that's what's happening in my pot. The good news is that none of these are harmful to people or dogs, provided you don't eat it. You don't want to feed the mushrooms to your pets or young children. They may be toxic, but they're not the deadly mushrooms you've heard about. In most cases, the fungus that you see will disappear in a couple days. It happens even faster if you let the pot dry out a bit. Fungus does not like dry soil. But some people don't like the aesthetics of them, and other people just can't accept the fact that they're not harmful. So they're looking for remedies to get rid of it. And the internet is full of these remedies. So here's a couple that you might stumble across. The first one is replace the soil. Like there's something wrong with the soil, so you have to get rid of it and put in new soil. Well, there's several problems with that. Fungus spread by spores. These are very, very tiny particles. They're flying around in the air. They're landing everywhere. When you take a breath in, you just sucked in some fungal spores. Changing the potting soil probably isn't going to help. And if you do change the potting soil, you also have to change the pot, or at least sterilize it. And you have to sterilize that plant somehow, because the leaves of that plant have spores on them. The roots have spores on them. You got to completely wash that plant before you put it in the new soil. If you transfer spores along with the plant, they're just going to grow again. That's what these fungus do. They grow in soil. So don't repot your plants for this reason. Some people suggest that you should dry out your pots. Now that sort of works. The fungus you see, the growth you see, generally dies back and disappears because it grows best when the soil is moist. So keeping it drier generally gets rid of it, except for one problem. It's still in the soil. The spores can dry out and last a long time. So unless you keep that pot dry from now on, it will come back. Now, there's a bunch of other remedies. Some people take aspirin, and who knows why they think that works. It doesn't. How about soapy water? Well, that may harm the fungus a little bit, but it's still in the soil. It's not going to get rid of the fungus. I've even seen people take garlic and blend it up into a mixture. I mean, that does get rid of some insects in the garden, so hey, it must work on mold in a potted plant, right? Probably not. Now, if you have the mold growing on the surface, you can scrape it off and get rid of it. Put it in a compost pile or just throw it outside. Again, that doesn't get rid of the problem. The problem is that the fungus is growing in the soil. What you see on the top is just the fruiting bodies of this fungus. So by scraping the top, you do make it look better, but you really haven't solved the problem. Now, the only fungus I worry about is damping off. On very tiny seedlings, it can be a problem and it can kill those seedlings. And what I've used for years is cinnamon. As soon as I see a problem, or I even suspect I might have a problem, sprinkle some cinnamon on those seedlings. I've even had pots with the white mold growing on the surface, and if you sprinkle some cinnamon on there, within a couple days that disappears. Now, I don't know if the cinnamon actually worked there. And this is one of the problems with a lot of these home concoctions. Remember what I said, the fungus shells itself above the soil, but it only lasts a couple days. So it might have been there a day before you even notice it. Now you come along and with some kind of concoction and you spread it all over the place, wait a day or two, it's gone. But it might have been gone without you doing anything. This is a fundamental problem with gardeners. They don't want to use a control. The only way you know that that garlic juice worked is to have two identical pots, both with the fungus, sprayed on one but not on the second one. Then at least you have an indication to say, hey, that might have solved the problem. So the bottom line is, these growths are not a problem. You don't have to do anything about them, but what you should do is learn to enjoy them. It's a brief event. Most of these are really cool looking. They have unusual colors, they have unusual growths. Enjoy them, and before long they're gone. And if you want to grow them, they won't grow back. They grow whenever they feel like it and whenever environmental conditions are perfect. If you want to learn more about the fungus in your soil, pick up a copy of my book, Soil Science for Gardeners. It discusses all kinds of microorganisms in soil, and particularly out in the garden, fungi play a critical role in the health of your plants. See you in the next video.